Good to have you on CNBC-TV18
Thank
and
you.
here at IIT Delhi for the Townhall. You
Very
lost a
well.
bet to your wife because she thought that you were going to take on the Uber opportunity and you weren't so sure. What made you finally decide to do it?
Well, my wife was always a believer, right? And I was competing against these capital names, Jeffrey, Immelt, Meg Whitman, these legends of industry. And I'm the dude who ran Expedia, right? With a long last name. So, but my wife always had faith in me, and she always, from the very beginning until the end, she just said, "You're the right person for this role. I'm telling you, you're the right person." And so she bet me $5, and I owe her $5 because it turned out that she was right. But when it came to the decision point, when they offered me the job, I kind of thought back to the advice that I always give young people, students or engineers about their careers. And I always say that you want to think about three things. One is you want to work with people who you like. You want to work with people that you respect, because why waste your time, working with folks that you don't respect? That's number one. Number two is you want to work at a company where you can make a difference. Working it's about making a difference in your own way. And everyone can make a difference in their own way, but you want to go to a place where you can make a difference. And then finally, you want to make a difference at a company or an organization that's making a difference. Number one for me at Uber was something that I couldn't solve for. I met the board members, but it's been, that was a little random one as far as what I like the people. And the people at Uber and the team has been extraordinary. I got lucky on that one. On the second and the third one, as far as going to a place where you can make a difference, Uber was in a lot of trouble. It was a real turnaround. And at a company that can make a difference. This is a company that is going to reinvent mobility going forward, is going to be one of the defining factors in what mobility means on a global basis for us. So number two and number three, I had big check marks. And that was ultimately the decision that I took.
What about your equation with Travis Kalanick now? There's been a lot of press on where things currently stand between the two of you. Apparently you got off to a great start. It's a bit shaky now. Where's the story between you and Travis? I
think, listen, under the circumstances, this has been a very difficult transition for the company, and it's been a difficult transition for Travis as well, right? I mean, it's from going and leading this company as the CEO to having to step back a bit as a board member. That's a tough transition. And obviously the press coverage would be difficult for anybody. What I can say as far as Travis goes is these transitions can be difficult, but he's always been there. He is still passionate about the company. He's rooting for the success of the company, and he's always been available for me when I've wanted to ask advice for him, etc. Now, in my coming on board as a new CEO, I have to make my mark. I have to take the company in a different direction, and I have. And that is probably a direction that Travis, might or might not have taken it, but I've got to take it in the direction that I believe in, with the culture and the norms that I believe in. But what I can say for Travis is he's been there for me. When I call him, he gives me good advice. And he and the board are rooting for the success of the company, which means they're rooting for my success, and so far so good.
I want to talk to you about the interesting development, and that has to do with Softbank.
Yes.
And I remember you said that I'd rather have the Softbank capital cannon behind me than facing me. You have an interesting situation in India where Softbank is also the largest shareholder of your fiercest competitor, Ola.
Yes.
So how does it all work?
Well, you'll have to ask them that question. I think, listen, SoftBank is a very big picture investor. And when I talk to Masa about his beliefs, Masa's core belief is that the ride-sharing space is a space that's going to grow. People 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when these folks get old enough to drive a car, because they're so young they can't be that old, they're not going to want to own cars. Right? Cars are a huge waste of assets. On average, cars on a global basis are used 4% of the time, and 96% of the time they're sitting around. It makes no sense as far as asset allocation goes. So more and more as we move forward, and as our business scales, And as we introduce new technologies like pool, where people can share a car, or we introduce new technologies such as autonomous, the cost of our services is going to start rivaling the cost of car ownership. And ultimately, our services are going to, I believe, replace car ownership. And just to put that into perspective, we account for less than 0.5% of miles driven on a global basis. Less than 0.5%. When our cost of our services get closer to car ownership, and I think it's going to be in 5 to 10 years, we're not talking about a business that's going to grow 50%. We're talking about a business that's going to grow 10x, 20x, 30x once we become a true alternative to car ownership. So I think SoftBank isn't thinking about Ola versus Uber. SoftBank is thinking about Ola and Uber versus car ownership, and I think that's a pretty darn good bet.
But still, I mean, from a practical perspective, you're competing with them in a market like India. You know, SoftBank clearly putting big money into Ola as well, which it's using against Uber to compete in a market like India. What's the conversation that you then have with Masa?
But I view this as we're not spending against Ola, we're spending against car ownership. We are actually building mobility as a service, and I think our competing with Ola, it's a healthy competition because it forces us to improve our product, it forces us to be innovative, it forces us to reduce prices, and ultimately that's going to come at the cost of car ownership. The businesses have to scale, they have to get more efficient, but you know, I don't have to worry about that. I just have to compete against Ola. I'll let Masa worry about, you know, what he's doing with his capital.
Okay, since we're talking about the future of mobility and we're talking about the future of Uber, you've also said in an interview that you don't want to be seen purely as a car-for-hire company. You want to have the ability to run a bus system for a city, for instance. I mean, how much into the future is that? I
think that it's within 5 years. So if you think about our business, and I'll compare us to Amazon. Amazon started with books. Okay, and then was able to expand into many other products and then opened up their marketplace to third-party retailers. I view us as where we want to go is be the Amazon of mobility. So we started with cars, which are books. Now if you take a look at our products, we've got cars and we're introducing auto and moto, for example. We're introducing pool as well. And we're also introducing other products such as Eats, which is a food delivery business that's growing very, very well in this marketplace. But we're not just about moving people, we're now about moving food, and we're going to be about moving things going forward. All of those are new product lines that we're adding, not in the retail space, but in the transportation space. The next step that we're taking is actually opening up our mobility platform. So for example, in San Francisco, this is a small test and it's going to expand, we are having a third-party company called Jump, which is plugging in electric bikes into our platforms. These are not Uber bikes, these are Jump bikes, but they're showing up in our platform so that our users can use them. You can expect that to happen over and over so that third-party mobility services can plug into an Uber. Where I want to get to is a world where you can take a train to commute or a ferry to commute, and once you get to the other side, there'll be a moto driver waiting for you, taking you from point to point, from the train station to your work and back, etc. And ultimately, our technologies, these matching technologies, the payment technologies, are going to extend beyond the private sphere, I believe, but also into public partnership as well. We're early in those conversations. It's going to require a lot of dialogue and a lot of trust, but I want Uber to be about getting you from point A to B, regardless of the way you get there.
Yeah, you know, you said that you also want to have the ability to move things. So is a foray into the logistics business something that you would consider as well?
I think it's certainly something that we are considering, and actually we're more than considering in the U.S. There's a business that we have built called Uber Freight. And Uber Freight, if you look in the U.S. at least, the way that freight moves around is that shippers will, for a certain percentage of their shipments, they call up a broker and they say, I want to move this shipment from point A to B, it's this many miles, it's got to get there by X date. And these brokers start calling truckers who are independent contractors, mostly in the United States, to get a bid, and get that shipment through. There's a huge friction cost to that. These brokers, they charge too much. So what we're doing is we're taking all of that process, we're using our marketplace technology, supply, demand, and pricing technology to totally automate it, so that we're essentially building an electronic Uber for freight, and at the same time we're working on autonomous trucking technology so that we can serve parts of those routes and eventually all of those routes through autonomous trucks and radically reduce the cost of shipping as well. So we are now actively working on getting things from A to B as well.
Outside of the issues and the challenges that you're dealing with inside the company, from an external perspective, what are you most worried about? What are the big risks outside of the regulatory risks that you're most concerned about today?
As far as Uber goes?
Yes.
I think the biggest concern that I have is, listen, we had a very tough 2017 as a company. And part of it was the company growing too fast and making some decisions that were about growth without thinking about what the consequences were. There's a real temptation in that kind of a world to shift too far the other way, which is to become too conservative, to create bureaucracies around decision making, to not want to take risks, etc. We haven't done everything right as a company, and certainly the company recognized that there was a change in leadership needed, and I'm part of that. But there was a lot right done about the company, the entrepreneurship, the drive for success, the passion around mobility, the quickness of decision making and the scaling of this business. All of that was right. And so I want to take the best of what made Uber what it was, this enormous company that grew faster than any other company in the world, this entrepreneurial bent, together with kind of the responsibility of growth, the partnerships that you have to build with regulators, with cities, etc., and put those two together in one really dangerously great animal. I don't want to shift too far the other way too fast.
So you brought in the adult supervision that was needed?
Well, I brought some adult supervision, but I still want to be a kid.
In the fourth quarter, your loss is down by about 25%.
Yes.
Gross revenue for the year is up 85% to $37 billion. What are the levers that you're going to push now to ensure that you continue to bring the losses lower?
The lever is scaling. Okay, so this is a business that from a bookings basis, it grew 80%. From a revenue basis, we're going over 100%. And what I look for is increasing automation and making sure that every single transaction and every single driver and rider that we serve gets the perfect experience. Right now, we get too many calls to our customer service lines. We get too many errors. And I think using automation and using smart data to reduce those errors is actually going to reduce our costs, increase our profit pools, and help us grow expenses much, much more slowly than revenue. So the business is scaling. I think we're on a very, very good path, and we just need to keep it there.
How important is India?